Hello, fellow warriors. Welcome to a new episode of Divided, Survived, and Thriving, where I get to have candid conversations about turning the painful process of divorce into a positive force in your life. I am Lila Aiken Ali, a divorcee, divorce coach, and the founder of Split FYI, an online divorce community rich in resources and information for anyone going through divorce or separation. So I'm super grateful to have these conversations with survivors of divorce who are willing to share their stories and how they overcame their battle scars and achieved peace and purpose in their lives. I do believe strongly in the power of story, and I hope that their tried and true pearls of wisdom will help guide you through your own process of separation and keep you good company along the way. Like so many other people I've spoken to, divorce has helped empower them, and also it taught me what it means to be my own best advocate. So I hope it can do the same for you. So without further ado, my guest for today is a friend, a colleague, and a healing addict. Karen Millon is a successful business entrepreneur with several accomplishments under her belt, but her most recent venture is into the world of podcasting and as a healing coach. Her podcast is called HEALIN, HEALIN, and I cannot recommend it enough. I love listening to her and all her guests. So Karen made the difficult decision to leave her husband of 13 years in 2013. So 18 years together they were. And this story did have the potential to become just another cliché, marked by betrayal, anger, and hostility. But instead, she and her ex-husband created something amazing. So for Karen, the focus on grieving and healing was key. And I'm going to let her talk to you a lot more about that. So without further ado, thank you, Karen, for being here. And I'm so grateful that you've taken the opportunity to talk to our audience on the whole healing process and the whole healing journey. Let's circle back to the beginning where it started. If you can share with us a little bit about that story of divorce and what made you and how it all happened, basically.
Thank you so much for having me, Leila. Thank you so much for the opportunity to inspire others to heal. Where do we start? I am the daughter of a therapist who knew that she worked a lot when I was little, that my father sadly ate street pork in the city of Colombia and developed a brain abscess and had suffered from epilepsy and had to work at the same time. And so he was heavily sedated during my entire childhood and does not remember my childhood. He was an absent father. And my poor mother, God bless her soul, had to work very hard as a psychologist, as a professor at the university, was always marking papers at night, working weekends, working. And so my childhood was very lonely, very neglected, very boring. And, but I grew up with a good role model of seeing hardworking people and people who strive and survive. And so I too focused on my education and did well, went to business school, did investment banking, was an entrepreneur, starting companies, and I felt really good about myself, except all this childhood neglect and what it did to me, making me feel that I wasn't a priority, that I wasn't important, having a whole lifetime of not being heard, not being seen, got me to marry someone who, like my parents, didn't see me, didn't hear me, didn't prioritize me. And my mother sort of knew that, and she was sort of saw that earlier in the relationship when we started dating. She knew that I wasn't happy. I wasn't dancing and celebrating and full of love and jitters and making out in the corner. And she was after me, Karen, you should go to therapy. there's this amazing new therapy out there called EMDR. You need to heal your childhood wounds. And I'm like, Mom, what are you looking at? Like, what are you talking about? Look at me. I'm doing great. I have an investment banking job. My ex-husband at the time was good looking, Italian, had 3 masters, highly educated, drove a BMW, had great parents, loving dad. I knew he was going to be a great father. I'm like, are you crazy? Look at me. I'm doing great. And so I married someone sort of knowing that I wasn't happy. And I really, really didn't feel like I could do better. I just like, what else? You check everything on the list. I'm a mother of 3. I would love all those qualifications for them to find someone with all that. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't heard. I wasn't seen. I wasn't understood. And then, but we had a lot in common. We both went to business school. We were both very ambitious. We looked at the future and saw the same thing. And when I became a mother, that vision and that commonality that we had changed for me.
Right.
Becoming a mother at 29 was for me kind of like the rebirth of all my wounds. And, when you find yourself, you're holding the 6-month-old baby, you're like, hey, Mom, when did you go back to work? Who took care of me? How long was I breastfed for? Did you hold me when I cried? Did you, and then I turned, my kids turned 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm like, oh my God, like all this neglect and childhood trauma. And then I'm like, you know what? My parents never picked me up from school ever, never came to see any of my softball games, never came to see my play, so I'm like, I am not going to go up the corporate ladder anymore. We make more money than we ever imagined. Like I'm just, this doesn't drive me. I'm not going to commute to work for an hour and leave my kids with a caregiver that I don't know. Yeah. And so my values changed, and we went from sort of double income, no kids, few homes, like, to I'm not going to work anymore. I'm going to be a housewife. And he's like, wait a minute, that's not what we talked about. Mm-hmm. And all of the differences that we had, because we had a lot of differences, and we weren't sort of like the romantic happy couple, came to a forefront. And, we just grew very unhappy. He did not want me staying home. He was way more ambitious than I was. And so, wanted to keep this lifestyle of 2 incomes and 5 trips a year and Prada and Louis Vuitton, when those things didn't matter to me. I wanted to be a good mom. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to have a career that fulfilled me. But at that moment, I'm like, I do not want my child to go through what I went through. So we grew very unhappy. We both were very unhappy for years. He actually took his wedding ring off as well, about 2 years before I left him. We had couples therapy. We did everything we could. We read all of the marriage books. We came up with lists of things we needed to improve. And then sort of things changed for about a year, and that was lovely. And then it went all back to the same. And I was really, really unhappy. I had shared it with friends and an aunt, very lonely. And Lila, out of the blue, I was on a business trip. I had started a company. I started a company with my brother in surgical simulation. And I traveled 14 times a year to conferences. And I met someone who was just my soulmate. It had helped that I had done a lot of therapy to understand why I married the wrong person, how I had married my father, what I needed, what I deserved. Right. I learned about love languages, like everything I had learned and read in books and through therapy, through couples therapy, it all came to a forefront. And I'm meeting this person who was not my type. I had never cheated in my life. I had never even flirted with another man. And I'm trying to set him up with a divorcee friend of mine who was older and had been divorced for a year. And I'm like, okay, what do you do Saturday mornings? How do you spend your free time? How do you spend your free money? If you have an extra $500, what do you do? Who are you? What are your love languages? And I'm interviewing her for her in front of her. I'm like, oh my God, Becky, he's so sweet. oh my God, he's so sweet. And I like to get to know people, all of my clients, my friends. I had never met anyone like that. And I basically, after 3 hours of talking, I came home the next day and I told my husband we were done.
Wow.
I was like, we haven't been happy for 7 years. I met someone and I told him exactly what had happened. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. This came out of the blue. I had never done this before. I had never imagined. I was not looking for this. I met this guy and he bang, bang, bang. He looked like this and he did this and he worked here and he wants to spend the weekends the same way I do. He enjoys the same things I do. We have the same love languages. And we're done. And I said, and he could not be it. He could be full of shit. He could be,
Right.
we live in separate cities. So he was living in New York. I was in Toronto. But what this showed me is that there's someone out there for me.
It was a catalyst. It was exactly, it showed you, but it also made you realize that you are in 100%. It was like the icing on the cake. You're in the wrong relationship for you. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what we did, obviously, as you can imagine, ego hurt, Italian. What do you mean you're leaving me for another man?
Yeah.
We both focused on grieving, where we both sort of stayed home for a month, really, and cried our eyes out. And we talked and talked and talked about our entire marriage, what went wrong, when did it started to go wrong, all of the differences we had. And Lila, what I did, which I highly recommend, is I started EMDR therapy twice a week. Mm-hmm. Basically, a week after I told them that we were done. My body, my soul told me I was done, but I was getting so much, resistance from my family and friends. And what do you mean you're done? And, my ex is a good person. It wasn't like my friends were seeing him that he was beating me up or he was disloyal or he was an addict or no, we seemed like we had a great marriage. He's a good guy. So we did a lot of therapy. And when you do a lot of therapy, you really, really focus on your wounds and why you married him. And then you realize that, it wasn't just that he completely took me for granted and completely didn't listen to me and completely, but I joined that club. I joined him. I stayed. This is not all his fault, No. And he actually took blame. I mean, when I meet people who want a divorce and they don't know if they should or not, I always say, try as best as you can, try as much as you can, read all the books, go to the couples therapy, because you learn so much about yourself. And when the decision is so hard and so painful that you've done your best, you tried it all. And so what happened is that he actually, even though I had left him for another person, he took full responsibility of the breakup. And he said, Karen, I let you down. I let my girls down. You told me all this a million times. You forced me to go to therapy. You asked me to change. You begged me to listen to you. You begged me to respect your wishes. And I didn't, and so then another therapy that he started to do, a bit in hopes that I would come back, was a couples therapy that I have a lot of episodes on the podcast called EFT, emotionally focused therapy, where you understand that marriage is not just two people with common goals or even like common love languages, but it's really important to feel that sense of attachment and secure trust, that you have my back, I have your back, a relationship where, you're not out there criticizing each other for all your faults, that you don't feel, that you're in a critical relationship, that you're so loved that you feel safe despite of all the good and bad and the ugly. And that also helps on your sex life, because you feel so safe that when you're married to someone who's like, oh, you're not a good cook and you're disorganized and you're untimely and always stabbing you, you're like, you're not going to let go and be adventurous or be creative or be naughty, because you're afraid of being judged. You're afraid of being, because you're in that relationship. So he and I also kind of really got how we in 17, 18 years were not attached to each other.
No.
We're not securely bonded. You know, and they talk about things like spooning when you sleep, and really having that sense of attachment and love. And we slept in separate bedrooms for 7 years.
Wow.
So, I mean,
Why is that? Why did you sleep in separate bedrooms? For the children, or?
No, because he loved to sleep with the light on to this day, which
Okay.
actually passed it to one of my children, and I'm just want to shoot myself every night. Sleep with the lights on, sleep with the TV on with CNN or the Fox News, or whatever's happening in the world, and the laptop on in the bed. And I'm like,
stimulation.
I can't, no, I need nighttime. I need the lights off. I need my beauty sleep. And if I don't sleep, I'm an ogre in the morning. So I'd be like, how do you prefer to sleep with that instead of sleeping with me? He's like, oh, back at you. Why do you prefer to sleep in the dark than sleeping with me? And I'm like, so, you know, it's funny. I didn't hide it. We would have new friends come over our home, and we had a big home with 6 bedrooms. So I had my own room, and he had, and my kids would go around and be like, that is daddy's room, that is mommy's room. And I didn't think any of it. I would tell my friends, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I need my beauty sleep. And, you know, but when you read that book, it's called Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. It tells you the importance of the oxytocin and the hormones when you hug someone at night. So it's not just, we're not going to talk about our sex life, but, you know, it's not like we were inactive. It's just, we never cuddled. We never touched, even though we had read the book together, the 5 languages of love. And I had expressed that I'm a touchy person, that I need hugs, that I need holding hands. And he knew that, but we never touched.
He just couldn't. He couldn't meet you there because it was something that he wasn't doing naturally. I think. I mean,
it wasn't his love language. And when you meet his mom, you know, lovely, lovely, and sweet. But you know, when you meet someone's like, "Come here, give me a hug."
Oh yeah,
like,
that's
hi.
me.
Yeah, you know, like if you have leprosy, and he's like, you know, he's not a touchy person. And my husband and I are both touchies, our first love languages, and we are all over each other all day long. And it does fill me with love. It does make me feel loved. It does make me so happy. All I need is a 40-second hug, and all of my problems go away.
I mean, we could talk for like an hour about hugging, because it's an interesting thing.
Oh yeah, you posted that, and I wrote you back.
Not only do I mean, I'm an adamant believer in the oxytocin effect of that. And I am an affectionate person too. You know, I'm Italian as well, half Italian. And I run around and chase my daughter all the time. I'm like, give me some oxytocin. You know, and I do know, and it's funny because I look at her and she's always been a very affectionate little girl. But you can see how habits are created when you're growing up, right? And it's not just from the parents, but it's the way that you operate in life, like what you think is acceptable and not acceptable. And right now she's going through, and you know, because you have 2 teenagers, she's going that preteen, you know, like,
don't touch me.
Kissing and touching is like this weird, you know, no-go zone thing. And so you could see she's kind of repelling from it. But innately, I know that because I gave it to her so much when she was little, and that's just an affectionate thing that we have as a family, that I figured, okay, she'll be all right. But at the end of the day, everyone creates their own love language, right? So even if it's passed on from family to family, you know, from parents to the kids, you do start creating like, what do you like? What do you need? Some people need validation. Some people need, as we know, you know, and for those of you who haven't read the book, I highly recommend the 5 love languages. Take the test. It's phenomenal. And what I do want to say though, is I don't think that 2 people have to have the same love languages to operate together. So what are your feelings about that? Because I know you're really well versed, and I know that your husband didn't have your love language, but even then, you know, obviously there was an attraction. There was something there that you did speak together somewhere, and it wasn't just, okay, we're going to build a life together, but there was some kind of I mean, at the end of the day, procreated 3 kids. So there's some kind of
two.
Two kids, sorry.
My
Two
third
kids.
is
So,
from my
yeah,
new
the third
husband.
one, sorry, the two kids. So tell me a little bit, like, what do you think? I mean, I know that
So I know that, you know, through the book, and I mean, I know that you can definitely be with someone and have different love languages. You need to be very aware of those. And if you love someone, be very aware that the way they feel love is very different from the way you feel love, and do that. And it does break my heart. And I say it a lot on the podcast that my ex did love me and showed me in his languages that were not only not my love languages, but they would annoy me. So
right,
when his first love languages were gifts. So he would shower me with this shirt I liked, and he would buy it in cream, blue, pink, and red.
right,
And I'm like, I don't need that. I don't want that. I never asked for that. And then I would go into, why are you spending the money? Why can't we save? You know, we're not saving enough. And it's like this whole
right.
myriad that not only he unsuccessfully made me feel love, but then he pissed me off, you know,
Right.
which is so sad because
So
that
sad.
he did it out of love, right? And back, I couldn't show him love because I don't enjoy buying gifts, you know. I would
Right.
do a lot. Mine is love and acts of service. So I'll cook you the most amazing meal and spend
Right.
all afternoon because I know that you miss your marsala chicken with extra mushrooms and truffle oil. And, you know, uh,
Sounds
I'll
delicious.
go out of my way to do a favor for you. Pick
Mhm.
up your kid from school, take her to swimming lessons, do her ponytail. Like, that's how I show love. And my friends know when I'm getting out of my way for them, they're like, wow. But I do have to say that if you are divorced and you're looking to find love again, if you read that book and you're very aware of your languages and you meet someone with your same languages, it just turns from not being work. You know how you say relationships are work,
Yeah.
you got to work, to not being work. And so I have been blessed. And I have to say, I was talking to someone earlier about how I had to go to therapy to realize that I was worthy of this happiness and worthy of love after not feeling it for 17 years and in my entire childhood. So I know that I'm very lucky, but when you find someone that loves you and makes you feel love constantly and effortless, because that's what he does,
Right.
it's really magical. And I wish that on anybody. And so if you have the power to not already be in a relationship,
Mhm.
I highly recommend it because, you know, my husband now comes home, he gives me a hug, he cuddles me, I'm doing the dishes and and I'm already so in love with him after 8 years. And then he comes and does all the dishes, and he does my kids' homework for an hour. And I'm like, you and I tonight, baby. Like,
Right.
it just happens without being work, without being, you know, when people ask me how active I am, I'm like, it's not work. You know, I'm honestly that in love, and that because of our love languages. So I am a huge uh, believer, but I also feel like if you love someone and you know that they do want a gift and that's how you feel love, go buy her some flowers. Go get her that shirt. Go get her that bag. Like, you know, if
Well, that's
that's what makes her feel loved.
well, I always say this. I say, that there. I think this is brilliant what you're telling people, because in the end of the day, I mean, there's an acceptance as well, right? So easily you can say, well, actually, this is how the acknowledge of it. If you're okay to say, this is how they're showing me their love, and I'm okay with this, I'm okay to receive this, then that's an acceptance you have to do. But you have to do the work before that to understand it. So you have to do the things like reading the five languages of love, doing the tests, working on yourself, healing. I mean, there was a lot of work that you did on yourself before you could manifest or find somebody that really fit into what you wanted and what you desired. You know what I mean? So I
Yes.
think that there's a lot of, it's not just knowing, okay, I love, touch, and that's my love language. It's not just knowing that. It's
No,
really
no.
doing a lot of the work that you did. I mean, copious amounts of work prior to that. And I think that understanding other people's love languages is super important as much as it is yours. But then it helps you decipher, can I live with that? can I be okay with what they can give? And that's the difference, right? It's like, but it's the work that you've got to do.
So going back to, yes, this is one aspect, right? But if you don't, if you don't feel worthy of love, or if you come into a relationship with a lot of childhood wounds and a lot of triggers that you're not aware of,
yeah,
he may have your same love languages and hug you and do your dishes. But if you're picking up fights 5 times a day because you're taking everything personally, because everything is hurting you, because you haven't healed, you have all this unresolved trauma, you'll go sadly from one divorce to the other one, as statistics sadly show that there's almost 70% divorce rate on your second marriage. And so one of my biggest goals with inspiring people to heal is that the more you heal, the better relationship you will have after. It's really taking divorce and making it way better, right? So one of the biggest benefits of healing is that when you really understand all of your wounds, all the sadness and the negative emotions that were brought up through your childhood, or sometimes you had a great childhood and it happened in college, you were bullied or you were very mistreated or something terrible happened to you, so there's 2 levels of healing. Is a journey that takes a lot of time and a lot of different modalities. And it starts with awareness and bringing the subconscious to the conscious. So that can happen through self-healing. That can happen through a good therapist where you are really aware of what happened to you and how those turn into negative emotions. So if you were a second child and your brother got all the attention and all the love and you got all the hand-me-downs and no one had time for you and you had to work so hard to fit in, you grew up with a negative emotion that I'm not good enough, I'm not this family's priority. And I can tell you all my negative emotions from a dad who wasn't emotionally present for me. So everything you do in life, whether the guy you're dating or the next job or your inability to ask for a raise, or everything is coming from that.
Yeah.
So one step that you could get through a good therapist, or actually I'm becoming a transformational coach and helping people arrive at those limiting factors so that then you can heal, not the therapist, but once you arrive at those limiting beliefs and these negative voices behind you, that's the first step, is awareness, is understanding. And that's very powerful because then you can be aware of it. You could make different decisions. So I was aware that it was very painful that my parents never picked me up from school. And I left my 6-figure job at a bank because I wanted to find an entrepreneurial way so I could pick up my kids from school. So that's life-changing, right? So I recommend any type of therapy or self-healing because it stops the cycle of abuse, whether that's just picking up your kids or sexual abuse. It's proven that you repeat the cycle if you're not aware. But just because you cognitively and rationally are aware that something happened to you and that changed you and that you're making a change, that doesn't mean you're healed. Because trauma gets stored in your body. Yeah. Sometimes you don't even remember what happened to you, but you get a call from your ex and you get agitated and you feel pain here and feel pain there. For example, I had 2 dogs who were mauled down by German Shepherds. I see a German Shepherd, I'm not thinking of that memory. I just get tensed up. I have to cross the border. I got to cross the street. The dog feels it a mile away that I'm already freaking out.
Right.
So I'm aware that comes from, it allows me to make that decision to keep myself safe, but I'm still freaking out. I'm not healed at all. Heal is when I can walk by a German Shepherd. I'm like, hi, puppy, good boy. And like 0 fear. That's healed. So my podcast is out there to bring to you a lot of different healing modalities that get you to feel so you can heal. That get you to, okay, that's good, you're aware, but how can you go back there and become that 8-year-old again and experience the trauma of your dog being mauled down, that feeling of helplessness, the feeling of fear, the stress, the regret that you didn't go and yank your doggy out before, you know, that you should have crossed the road before, you shouldn't be in that dog. Like, heal it, feel it, heal it, reprocess it. And that's what EMDR, I have 8 episodes on that, does.
Right, yeah.
Where you reprocess it and you go back there and you say, you know what, Karen, you were 8 years old. You didn't know what you were doing. You know, it's okay. That's not going to happen again. And you heal it. And so there's EMDR, there's somatic experiences, there's hypnosis. And yesterday I had a recording with a psychedelic expert, which is sort of trying illegal in United States, except Oregon, but she's from Amsterdam. And I had a guest who went to Ecuador and had a psychedelic ceremony. And, you know, instead of having, you know, to heal, you would take 1 to 5 EMDR sessions, you know, in one day you could go back and experience that and feel it, cry it, and reprocess it and set free. So that is the therapy that I've done a lot of. And it's just so amazing and highly recommended, because I would go with a wound. For example, my husband is a great dad who loves to play with my kid.
Right.
And every time I used to see him play Barbies for like an hour, I would get angry. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, and I'm like, you know what? That's not his issue. That's my trigger, that I never had a daddy who played with me. Right. And that sucked. And the minute I went and did an EMDR therapy and just remembered how sad it was to see my dad and not have any interaction, and how I couldn't even remember happy memories. And I felt sorry for myself and I cried, and then I healed. I'm like, you know what? But you are lovable. But he loved you. He kept his job to pay for your private school so you could have a good education. That's love. Yeah. But when you're 7 and 8, you don't think that, right? No. You just feel unlovable. So
also, you're seeing what other kids are getting. You're seeing, when you're a child, you see and you compare what other kids are getting and what other kids are doing. And that's all your world, you know. And so if you're not getting something other kids are getting, you obviously, why am I not good enough? Why am I this? And we start creating, right? Just in anything, like in school, why didn't I get that A? I worked just as hard. Why didn't I? It's layers and layers of layers. I'm not good enough, you know? And yeah. Very difficult.
So the great thing in a relationship, so it's not just the love languages, is that instead of picking a fight and then I start bitching and and it escalates, it goes to, you know what, sweetie, this is my thing. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to journal. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to book my EMDR session. It doesn't affect me anymore. I actually see them play and I'm like, how lucky am I? You know, like,
totally.
And like that, I can go on and a bunch of different things that I've had to heal. And to this day, I had a session about, you know, you and I had an amazing conversation about what I want to do to monetize. And I realized I have a huge issue making money, because every time I made money, it disappeared. I'm not going to say how, but, you know, so it's, you know, it's like I haven't processed those traumas of, you know, and I was in shock, you know, and this is someone who's continuously working on herself to realize like, oh my God, I didn't know. And then I had issues as a child. My parents were always like scrabbling and to pay bills and like this. And I'm like, oh, and this happened. And in my previous marriage, all these things happened. And now this go wonder why I wasn't, you know, having a hard time pricing myself, or, you know what I mean?
Of course, we don't value ourselves in so many ways because of all of that, and scarcity comes in, and so many different things of, are we good enough? Are we good enough? And especially, and I'll say, and it might not have been in this case for you with divorce, but I think there is a huge component to that, to a lot of people going through a separation, a breakup, a divorce. You know, that's the first thing you feel. You're like, well, I'm almost an imposter. Like, who am I? Am I good enough to do this? And you start questioning all of this stuff. So there's a process of healing that you need therapy for. And then there's a process that you need also to start believing in yourself. There's a healing process, but then also start recognizing, what are you saying to yourself? Why are you saying this stuff? Right? There's a part of healing, but there's a part of also our self-talk that we just have this horrible. Like, it's not what our parents said or our friends say or people say or society says. It's what we say to ourselves all the time.
Huge. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I say it, and I had an IGTV video in October, which coaching is crucial. You need healing, and you need coaching, and you need mindset. And I even have episodes on cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR. And when you find a therapist that can do both, it's amazing. Because if you, I mean, I'm 45 years old. If you spend 20 years feeling a certain way, okay, I'm healed. That's awesome.
Right.
But you're trained. 20 years of negative self-talk, negative misbelief, like that mindset, and believing and manifesting and talking and positivity, that all, and the tools, parenting tools, daily tools, rituals, habits. So I honestly, if sadly is, it's expensive, but if you can and you have the resources, stop buying shirts and makeup and wine is the best return on investment. I spent a lot of money healing, and it just feels great when you have something that, I had a session in the summer because I'm in New York and meeting new friends, and someone was giving me the cold shoulder, and I'm all of a sudden like having a panic attack. And what did I do? And should I apologize? Should I call her? And I did a session, and he's like, you're not in high school anymore. In high school, you weren't the prettiest, you weren't the wealthiest, you weren't this. These people brought you down, got you, heal, cry it out. You feel like $1,000,000 when someone gives you the cold shoulder again, and you're like, okay, you're lost, like really. But when you really don't feel it,
right,
it's just like, it's worth every penny.
It really is.
Just, and when you spend years without fighting with your husband because he brought the wrong tomato, or because he played with your kid too much, because he's not triggering you anymore.
Right.
Because, bringing the wrong tomato reminds you of your dad buying you the wrong shoes, or.
It's so true.
It's just, it's so gratifying.
Well, then it's cyclical. It's one of those cycles that become, you fight with about the tomato because it's really deep rooted because your father didn't get you the right shoes. But then you are now called the crazy person because you're fighting over a tomato. So then now you start saying, am I crazy? And then there goes, oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And then we start doing it. So the cycle keeps going, and years of that, layers and years of that, is just, it comes at you. And you're right. Listen, therapy can be expensive, 100%. There are alternatives. There's loads of therapy groups. I'm sure that Karen will definitely have all that information, given to people. That I'm sure there are people out there that conduct a few groups of therapy, that if people can't afford a one-on-one, I totally understand.
There's a lot of self-healings now, like Dr. Nicole LePera with The Work. There's a woman who put this book called The Work. Even Catherine Woodworks, I read her book on conscious divorce. The type of questions she makes you go through, amazing. I mean, there's many ways of healing. It's a journey. You could do it on yourself, and it will take you a year or two, because it's slowly, and you got to have the discipline. If you have the resources, I'm like, highly recommend any type of therapy. If you can find a therapist that practices EMDR, or EMDR and cognitive behavioral therapy, or more than one modalities to help you get there sooner and quicker. I am a huge fan and totally on a mission to spread the word about these modalities, because it's amazing. With EMDR, you don't go there and sit in the couch and talk about your week.
No.
You don't talk about how you feel and your friends did this to you and your kid did not listen. No, it's focused. What do we want to work on today? I want to work on my money issues. I want to work on this feeling that I don't know what I'm worth, that I don't know what to charge, that it brings a lot of anxiety. Okay. What's the negative feeling? What are the memories associated with that? Okay. When I was sick, my dad didn't want to give me my allowance. When I was 7, that happened. When I was this, I made $150,000 and I went to pay my husband's debt. And process it and feel the anger and the frustration and heal it.
Right.
And he's like, you know what? I'm 45 years old now. That has nothing to do with my potential, my worth, my ability to help others. That is separate. And if someone can afford it, that's good. I'm providing them uh, podcasts, blogs, inspiration, help, referrals. But if anybody wants to work with me, that's awesome.
Right.
And I can help you
That's a great attitude.
heal a lot faster. But he took EMDR.
Oh, I know. I can.
Yeah, I'm sure you even remember my voice talking to you a month ago.
I know, completely
Right?
different.
I don't know what I want to do. And he's like, and then, it's amazing.
It is. I mean, it is.
It's amazing.
It's funny because, and it's not funny, but I'm just saying that it's an interesting topic. I get these phone calls a lot from people who really, especially those who've gone through divorce. Okay. And I know yours is in a particular field, especially with therapy, and you are very well versed also via your mom. But there are a lot of women I know who really want to take what they've gone through and do better, become a coach, help other people. And like you about a month ago, it's the same thing. They say, well, what if I can't help them? What if I do this? The self-talk starts happening because, listen, as much as we want to help other people, we're all there. It's a normal passageway that we start feeling in doubt. We start feeling, how can I add value to other people? Wait a minute. So it's also that process of, wait a minute, I've added value to my life. I've added value to myself. Start recognizing what you've added. Look at all what you have done, what you've created. I mean, me looking on the outside in your life, it was easy for me to say, well, wow. I mean, first of all, you have an amicable relationship with your ex. You did a lot of work so that you healed and there was no anger. Your children are, by and large, having such a great passageway between both parents. And I mean, for the most part, exactly like that, the way I heard. And so here they are, like, you've created this great environment of safety, of love. And you refound somebody, and you found somebody that is your soulmate and who you want to be with. And I mean, why are you not? Like, why wouldn't you see yourself as valuable? So that's what's funny, because a lot of us can't see it when we're in it, and how much we've done. We know that we want to help other people, but then all of a sudden can we help other people? Are we capable of doing it? And of course, everybody needs a helping hand. I know, when we were going through it, you always need that helping hand, whether it be therapy, coaching, a friend that's really, is ready to give the time to you, because a lot of friends don't want to be in that spiral.
And I don't recommend, as important as friends are, and God knows we all need them, and I'm grateful for each and every one of them, when you're in that heavy space to berate on your friends on a daily basis, it's hard, and it's really hurtful for the relationship, because you then heal, you forgive, you forget,
right?
But they don't. If you tell your friend that your ex called you X name one day, they will never forget. And you need to forgive, because you're co-parenting with this person. This is going to be the grandfather of your grandchild, like and they won't forget. And it's also really important to get that objective perspective, of someone who's not vested at all, who doesn't know them, who there's no history, because he hurt their feelings 10 years ago. Now it's payback. Finally, she dumped your ass. So now, it's like, it's great that if you can afford it, even if they're experts or not, like, it's so helpful to have an objective person to talk to and hold your hand and hold space for you, and ideally help you see things that you haven't seen before, or bring anything from the subconscious to the conscious.
And the tools not to stay stuck in that story of yours. And I think that's the key, is that when you talk to your friends about certain things, you're just staying in that story, because 9 out of 10 times, and that's why I say, if it's a friend who is well versed and who can be objective and can listen to you without judgment, without judgment or anger as well, because to a certain degree they're also angry. They're angry for the situation that you're in, and they feel the hurt for you. So while you keep telling the story, you're repeating it, you're staying in it. And it's the story you're saying. You're not saying it with the objective to figure out how to get out of that story. You're telling them because you want company in that story, right? So you're like, okay, sit with me and have a coffee with that bad, horrible story that I have right now.
And let's commiserate. And what that happens, actually, I don't know if you heard it, the last episode with Virginia Gilbert. You should have her on your show. She's amazing.
Yes.
And it's like, it's funny because I wrote a book on divorce, and there's so many things I missed in that she brought up that I did that. And it's just not staying in that story of victimization. And can you believe what he did to me yesterday? Because you actually re-traumatize yourself.
Yeah.
You actually stay in that mode versus saying, okay, move on. That was yesterday. We're going to work on today. We're going to work on tomorrow. And step out of there from that anger that's really essential at the beginning. It's a crucial part of the grieving process. But you do need to move to the acceptance. And something she said about is that radical acceptance that you're not going to change your ex. No. Stop giving him an epiphany on how he should feed your kids, put them to bed, or heal. If you didn't change him in a year that you were together, or in 17 years, you are not going to change him now or change her. So, and that's stuff you get through coaching, right? Because, there's two roles. The therapist is going to help you go deep, and the coaching is going to hold space for you to integrate all that and get a plan with tools.
Yeah. Exactly. I often call it, I always say, because, and you'll appreciate this because you're an entrepreneur yourself and you've done, business on your own accord, but it's the business plan of life. And, and it's much like that. And I know some people say, well, that's kind of it could be a cold approach. I said, well, listen, sometimes you got to take emotion out of it, because if your emotion is involved when you're creating this plan, then you're completely skewed and you don't see what's good for you. You're not really visualizing yourself out of the gates. You're not visualizing yourself over there, right? So it's like, let's create that business plan. That's what I like to do. So
it is.
Yeah. And look, and when you create, and, we've created a business, what it's like. And a lot of it is the same process. You think about the values of the company, you think about the values, what your values are. You have to do a lot of introspective work in order to get there. And so via therapy, coaching, everything, questions, books. There's so many books out there that you can, with questions. Even the five love languages. I mean, start there. Like I always say, it's just even start with that one. It's a fun one. It's a great one. Do it with your girlfriends. It doesn't matter. Sit around with a glass of wine and do it. But start somewhere where it starts asking you these questions to get to know who you are, why you operate the way you do, and why you're attracting the people that you attract. So
right. Very valuable. Another great book is Finding the Love You Want by Harville Hendricks. It talks about being very aware of your childhood wounds and how you meet people that have those wounds. That's the episode you like. That's the basis of imagotherapy.
I love it.
It's shocking when you learn that. You're like, holy cow. And you look at your ex relationship and it's like exactly everything that I was used to, that I wanted to ideally change and heal. And
that I highly recommend everyone listening to. I mean, imagotherapy, I've never heard of it before until I listened to it about it in your podcast. And I highly recommend everybody to listen to that episode. Well, all of her episodes, but honestly, Karen, I love what you're doing, and your drive and your ambition and your just how you are as a person. Honestly, I enjoy talking to you all the time. It's like always that we're just having a great chit chat. I learned so much from you. And I'm so glad that you're now a part of the coaching scene, and anybody who needs a healing coach, I highly recommend Karen, because she's very well versed in all of this and the processes, and, and how to process what they're going through if they're going through to a therapist too.
Yes.
A lot of times I really do believe if you have the luxury that you can have this village around you, which I always say is essential. And sometimes you might have to give up a couple of things, like you said, for a period of time, so that you do have this. This is the best investment you can make. But, you go to therapy, sometimes you need somebody to process all of that with and start putting it into action. So what you're doing is fantastic. I'm very excited to hear
Thank you,
more.
Layla. I feel the same way. I feel very blessed to have met you and be part of your village, and you were very instrumental on my path. And I'm super excited to keep knowing you and keep working with you and going to LA and partying with you, going to a dance club.
Wait. Yeah, right.
That's going to be on my bucket list. Go dancing
Yeah,
with you.
exactly. We'll go dancing.
We'll go dancing.
That's for another show. Anyway, thank you for being here, and I would love you to just tell everybody again repeat how they can find you, and the podcast I mentioned, but maybe mention it again, your book, everything, if you can.
Thank you. You can find me on Instagram at Healing with Karen, healing without the G. My podcast is Healing with Karen Millon, Heal In. And my new website is going to come out next month in January 2021 at healing.net. Thank you so much for having me, Layla. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you, lovely.